Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Azren, the language nerd here, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds, and welcome to today's podcast episode and, of course, YouTube video. I've cleared up my video quality for those watching on YouTube. It's not as fuzzy anymore. I just decided to whip out my laptop and use that camera instead until I get my phone fixed. And so I'm happy about that. So in today's podcast and video, of course, I'd like to answer a question I received on YouTube. This is a comment that somebody left on one of my recent videos. The comment is the following. I've been studying Spanish for a number of years. A big issue with learning Spanish for me is I'm lost as soon as I hear a native speaker say words that I don't know. Do you have any tips to help with this? Yes, I do. In fact, I have 6 different tips. The first tip is the following. It's highly likely that you need to find material that's easier to understand. Often, when people are struggling with listening comprehension, often what's going on is they're listening to content that's way too difficult. You're a beginner, you started learning Spanish 2 months ago, and you're trying to watch Netflix series in Spanish, and that's just too hard. There are far too many words you don't know, let alone that they're speaking really fast. And some people have an accent you're not familiar with, so on and so forth. So it's highly probable you need to find content that's much closer to your level so that there are less unfamiliar words that you're encountering. And that leads to tip number 2, which is to use nonverbal cues. There are 2 main nonverbal cues to look out for. So the first one here is body language. You can look at their hand gestures, you can look at their facial expressions. You know, it's funny, when we are learning a language, we get tunnel hearing, not tunnel vision, but tunnel hearing. What that means is we focus so heavily on the words that people are using, and we try to understand the words so much that we stop paying attention to the body language and other cues that might help us figure out what they're saying. And people talk with their hands, people make gestures, people have facial expressions, there are other cues that can help us understand what's being said. The other type of nonverbal cue you want to look out for is the context of the conversation. The context of the conversation. What is the conversation about? That's going to help narrow the number of things that the person might be saying. And even, here's a fun fact, even native speakers need context to understand what's being said in a conversation. Here's an example of that. I had a private Mandarin class earlier today. In my class, I showed my instructor a 30-second clip from a video I was trying to watch earlier before the class. I didn't understand the 30-second clip. There were too many words I didn't understand, and it wasn't sticking. So I thought to myself, if I show it to my instructor, who is bilingual in English and Mandarin, she would be able to help me. And here's the thing, she wasn't initially. Initially, she wasn't able to help because even her, the native Mandarin speaker, listening to that 30-second clip, she was having a difficult time piecing together what they're saying because she didn't have the context of the conversation. She heard the words, she understood, but she was missing something. And it wasn't until I showed her a longer clip, we watched a 3-minute segment instead of just the 30-second clip. Then the 30-second clip made sense. She's like, they're making a reference to this. I didn't realize they're referencing that. Okay, I got it. And then she was able to help me understand. So even native speakers need context to fully understand what's being said. And without that context, even native speakers are going to have difficulties understanding what someone else is saying. Let's get to tip number 3, which is knowing, if possible, the topic of the conversation in advance. For example, if you're going to listen to a podcast or watch a video in whatever language, it's going to be helpful for you to know who's in the video. For example, if you're watching an interview, someone's being interviewed, who is that person? What's their background? What are they probably going to be asked questions about? What are they going to discuss? And ask yourself if you know anything about that topic. So if you're going to go watch a podcast or something, and the individual is going to talk about hiking or mountain climbing, whatever it is, and you realize, I don't know anything about mountain climbing, let alone in my first language. So you might need to go do some basic research before you watch the video of how do you say mountain? How do you say climbing? Maybe there's a couple words for climbing gear I should know about. Maybe I should research this guest on the podcast, so when he or she is saying XYZ in the podcast and sharing stories, I knew that those stories might be shared because I knew something about the guest. So if you can, know as much as you can about the topic of conversation before you actually enter the conversation. Sometimes you can do this in a different way. If you're going to have a real conversation with someone and it's not a pre-recorded video, what you can do is you can prepare for the range of conversations that might happen. I'll give you an example. So the other day I went to an event called Chinese Corner here in my city. And it's basically a casual opportunity for people to practice Mandarin. It's open to people of basically any level, so on and so forth. It was my first time going to the event. And in fact, it was really the first, or at least one of the first times the event was being held. So I knew that the person running the event probably won't know me. I'm not going to know them. I'm going to walk in. And I was picturing a lot of the things that I might be asked or what I might have to talk about. I was picturing what might happen and being mentally prepared for the range of conversations that might occur. And sure enough, some of those conversations did happen. And I was glad that I'd done a little bit of preparation. Of course, you can't prepare for everything, but still being slightly prepared for some of the conversations is way better than not being prepared at all. Tip number 4, keep listening past the word. Keep listening past the word that you didn't understand. So if you're watching a video, podcast, talking to someone, whatever it is, don't let the one word derail you. Don't let yourself hear one word and then your brain freezes up. Don't let that happen. Because here's the thing, if you keep listening past the word, you keep listening to what the person's saying, you might hear that individual say something that clarifies the part of the conversation you didn't understand. You might hear something that clarifies it. Because maybe the person's going to rephrase what they just said. We do that all the time. We rephrase things. We say them in different ways. I literally just said it right now. I said, we rephrase things. And then I said, we say things in different ways. So if you're an English learner and you didn't know the word rephrase and you stopped listening, you wouldn't have heard the next sentence where I literally clarify the thing I said previously. We do it all the time. So they might clarify it later. Maybe the native speaker is speaking to someone else and the other person says something that clarifies it for you later. Something might happen if you keep listening that clarifies it. Or maybe it doesn't. And that's okay too. Maybe you miss a word. But if you keep listening, you'll still understand what they talked about. And it won't matter that you missed a word. So you have to keep listening past the word that you didn't understand. Tip number 5 of 6, or tip number 5? Yes, tip number 5 is take a breath and relax as much as you can. Listen, if you're going to listen past the words you didn't understand, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to take a breath and try to keep as relaxed as you can. And here's something else that's worth knowing too. Your brain, I was thinking of this myself the other day, maybe 2 days ago, 3 days ago. The brain is like a computer. Our computers can overheat. I've had many experiences over my life, particularly when I used to edit videos. And my video editing software would use a lot of the computer's power, and the fan would turn on and it would make this loud fan noise. The computer would get hot. The computer would slow down because all of the computer's thinking power or CPU usage, I don't know what the word is, all the computer's power was being focused on the video editing software and running that software. And so because of that, if I tried to open an internet browser or do something else, it would be slower, it would be clunkier, maybe it would freeze, and maybe it would crash. That was more on my old computer than this one, but still it would happen. And our brains are very similar. If you're stressed and you're anxious or you're nervous, your brain is using up energy into being stressed and anxious and nervous. And 100% or 90% or a significant percentage of your brain power is going towards that. And that leaves less brain power to try and understand what someone's saying, and less brain power for you to even express yourself very clearly. So doing what you can not to be completely relaxed, because if you're very anxious or nervous, I don't know if that's practical. I've definitely been in situations where I'm feeling really nervous and it would be seemingly impossible for me to feel completely calm. But taking a few deep breaths, listening to music before the thing that's coming up comes, so you can calm yourself down, doing what you need to do to calm yourself down as much as you're able to, will also help tremendously in that situation where you're listening to a native speaker. And the final tip number 6, is asking for help. Asking for help can be done in one of two ways. If it's a real life conversation with a real life person that you're talking to, asking for help means you ask them to slow down, you ask them to repeat what they said, you tell them you don't understand, you communicate to them that you're not understanding, and that person will hopefully try to do something at least to make it a little bit easier for you. Sometimes they do it effectively, sometimes not. So that's one way to do it. Keep in mind that if they're trying to slow down for you, they're trying to help, and what they're doing to help you understand is not helpful. That happens frequently. If that's happening, remember, take a breath, relax. It's not the end of the world. It's okay. That conversation will be over soon anyway, so it's not, don't let it ruin your whole day. Don't let one stressful moment in the day ruin the whole day for you. But that's one way to do it that may, like, at least has a certain percentage of a chance of working. The second way is if you're watching a video or podcast, then what you might do is, if you're not able to understand something, ask someone for help. Literally ask a teacher, private instructor, a language exchange partner, a native speaker, a bilingual friend, someone on the internet, in a forum. Ask Google or whoever. Ask someone for help to figure out what's being said in the section that you're not understanding. I do that all the time. So let's recap those 6 different tips, the 6 tips to make listening comprehension a little bit easier. Okay, particularly when you hear a word and you don't understand what it means, and that derails you. You stop understanding everything said after that word. So tip number 1, you need to find material that's actually easier for you to understand. If you're hearing so many, like lots of words you don't know, you probably need to find easier material. Number 2, use nonverbal cues. Body language is one of them, and of course, the context of the conversation. Tip number 3, know the topic of the conversation. Know the topic of the conversation in advance, as much about it as you can. If you can't know in advance because you're walking in blind into a situation where you don't really know what they're going to say, which is very frequent, at least prepare for a certain range of conversations that might come up based on your best estimation. Tip number 4, keep listening past the word you didn't understand, because the speaker may say something later that helps you understand what you missed earlier. Tip number 5, take a breath, relax as much as you can. That'll help you communicate and understand what's being said. And last but not least, ask for help. Whether it's the person that you're talking to, ask them to slow down, ask them to explain a word you didn't understand. Or if it's a video or podcast, you might ask a native speaker, a bilingual speaker, someone that can help you break down, and someone that can help explain the things that you're not understanding. Okay, thank you for watching / listening to this podcast / video. Please hit me up on any social media platforms you use. My username is Polyglot Azren, POLYGLOT AZ or ZREN. You can find me there, or simply search Azren the Language Nerd, and you can follow me. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll chat soon. Bye-bye.